It's a 9-step process to change a career. I boiled it down to a 9-step process after going through the career changes myself and evaluating and constantly re-evaluating and asking people what they do too to change their careers. I came up with 9 points. It's not 10. I'd like to say it's 10 steps, but there just isn't another step in there. Point number 1 would be phase out what you don't like. If you don't like what you're doing at your current job, phase it out. Get a part-time, get some education at night, maybe a class or something. Join a social group or something. Go make films with somebody or do some pottery work or paint classes. Just get out there and start meeting people and find something that you might be interested in doing for a career and keep focusing on that, because eventually your job, if it's a day job or a night job or whatever, is going to become less and less interesting, and you're going to find more and more opportunities to get into the career that you want by phasing out what you don't like. And step 2 is focus on what you do like. So those 2 points kind of go together. You got to keep focusing on that. If I want to be a watercolor painter and I want to make a career of it, I keep focusing. Every single day I remind myself I want to paint watercolors. I think of this as the Christmas test or the holiday test, where you're sitting around the table with family members and they say, so what have you been up to for the last year? I like to have an exciting story to tell. I don't want to say, well, I've been stuck in this job I really hate, because everybody's like, oh, sorry to hear that. And, you know, it's not as exciting and fun as embarking on something that you like to do. I'm not saying the money's important right away. Eventually that will follow. But just getting into that career mode where it's an exciting story to tell, and then you can liven up the lives of everybody around you. Step 3 would be to write down your plans. Everything that you plan to do in your career, write it down. If you don't write it down, you're not making this personal contract with yourself. And this personal contrast has some sort of, I'm not even sure what it is, it's some sort of mental connection. I know it works. I just know it works because I've been doing it for years. I wrote on a card in 1997 all these things that I wanted to do, and I laminated it so I couldn't change anything. Well, things did change, but pretty much I was pretty much on course after that. Memorize your mandate. I call it memorizing your mandate. A mandate is like a directive from above. You're giving yourself a directive to follow every day. You memorize it so that at any given time during the day, you could wake up from your sleep and know exactly where you're going. That's very important to do. Keep stoking the fire. Stoking the fire is obviously just keep getting fired up about it. Never let the flames fizzle out, because you're just going to get sidetracked, and then there's going to be, maybe you're working in an office with a bunch of papers around you and you get inundated with phone calls and people bug you, and then you forget what you were trying to do, and the little card flies out the window, and then 2 years later you're like, I wish I wasn't at this job. Well, you could have done something about it 2 years prior. So that's memorizing your mandate, or sorry, stoking the fire. Ignore all objections. If somebody comes up and says, well, I wouldn't bother with that career, I've tried that, it's not exciting, and I don't think you should either. Ignore them. Chances are they tried it themselves and failed, or they really don't want you to leave their place of work because they like you, which is really nice, and it's a great idea, but you have to get on with your life. You can't stay at some position just because somebody wants you there. Keep yourself educated. That's very important. I think a lot of people think they go through school and they're educated. I don't even know if I know that there's an educated person out there, because we're constantly in the process of education, or we should be. Always educating. Years ago I thought the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. That's just because I thought I knew so much about audio-visual at one time. And of course, the more I studied and found out what other people are doing in their careers, the more I realized there's a lot to know out there. You can never know everything. So just sharpening your chops and keeping up with technology and keeping up with the times is important. So education is very important. And staying on track. Always stay on track. If you feel yourself going off track, get back on track. You know, if you feel a little depressed one day, get yourself back into a positive state of mind and get back on track. And I think one of the most important rules here is don't get too comfortable. That's number 9. Do not get too comfortable, because people tend to get complacent, and they get jaded, and then all this negative stuff surrounds them, and they say, I wanted to try that career, and I didn't bother because for whatever reason, they gave up. They failed, and they don't want to admit they failed, so they become complacent, and they make excuses and stuff like that. But I think it's like driving a car. If you get too comfortable behind the wheel, forget the road map and your destination, you just go off track and you crash. So avoid that at all costs. There's no such thing as a dead-end job. It's a misnomer. Something can be learned from every single job. I was delivering. I mentioned garbage bags. I delivered garbage bags. That was my first job. Not delivered, sold door to door. 13 years old, door to door, selling garbage bags. Put up with a lot of rejection, but I learned a lot from that gig. And I didn't really know how much I learned until I was in my 20s. And all the jobs I've had about 25 different jobs the last time I counted. And there was something to learn from every single one of those jobs. If somebody was mismanaging a company, I'd learn about that. If they were managing it properly and treating people properly, I'd learn about that. So just about everything in there. If I had to sweep a floor, I wasn't concentrating on sweeping the floor, although it would be the best swept floor you ever saw. I was sweeping the floor and I was paying attention to how they ran their company, because I use a lot of these principles that I learned from that experience now in my own profession and with my part-time business that I run as well. No such thing as a dead-end job. And there's no such thing as a dream job either. My dream job, when I started getting into it, after a few years, I realized there's a bunch of little quirks I'm not quite crazy about. So I hate to say dream job, because every job has its quirks that you'd have to get used to. If you want to be a Hollywood actor, you're going to have to get used to what it means to be a Hollywood actor or a rock star or whatever it happens to be. But you put up with it, and if you don't like it, you go through the whole process again. It's an evolution of your career.